That 1930s guy here in downtown Chicago. As you see this nice unicorn balloon. This building, where this balloon is where the Chicago Board of Education meets. Fascinating stories of the 1930s, not just in Chicago, but in the country, the world, is how the teachers of Chicago, Cook County actually, had to work without pay from April 1931 until August 1934. And it's just an incredible story, the dedication that they showed, and just the craziness of the times, the early 1930s. Even before April 1931, starting in December 1929, they actually only had 8 paychecks. That's it. And their teachers were supposed to be paid bi-monthly. So, and it's just an incredible story. You definitely want to hear this one. I've been dying to tell it. And now on the south side of Chicago, one of the many public high schools, and I picked this one to talk because it's pretty cool. It's right next to Guaranteed Rate Field, aka the old Comiskey Park, where the White Sox play. So, I mean, literally, it's right behind it. I mean, that would be pretty cool. Imagine going to high school saying, oh, yeah, I can look out my window and see the White Sox. That is pretty neat. I bet there's not many Cubs fans that go to this school. Anyway, back to... that's a little crooked, sorry. Back to the teachers. So 1929... stock crash happened. City of Chicago during the prosperous days was spending more and more money. Sorry, my nose is a little red because it's only 13 degrees outside. It's pretty cold. But anyway, they couldn't pay. At the end of 1929, they couldn't pay the teachers because the economy went downhill, revenues went down. But they were hoping this was just a bump in the road. So they had to make a decision over who they're not going to pay. And they decided to pay the teachers and instead lay off 1,700 police officers. And this is in the midst of a crime wave. Crime's going up, not down. And they decide, teachers are more important, so we'll pay them. And then things were still pretty bumpy, but they managed to pay them sometimes in the next year and a half. Between then and April of 1931, teachers received 8 paychecks on time. And they were supposed to be paid bi-monthly, so they missed a lot of paychecks. But the crisis, April came, just on the verge of the banking crisis in Chicago, and they said, they're out of money. They can't pay you anymore. So they decided to. Here's another angle of the school here. There's the school. There's the ball field. That's pretty cool. I wonder if there's any more schools this close to a professional stadium. But they started writing script, or warrants they called them. They were just a fancy name for an I.O.U., saying we'll pay you as soon as we get money. They made a deal first with the utility companies, power and water, to make sure that they would accept this script, so teachers wouldn't be suffering, completely. But there was no deals with any grocers or businesses otherwise, so it was really up to the business whether they wanted to accept these or not. Otherwise, you're a teacher, you just had to hope someone could help you out. And they didn't know how long this was going to last. They didn't realize in April 1931 that their next paycheck wouldn't come until August of 1934. they would have to keep accepting this script, these warrants, and in time they started losing value. People started losing credibility because it was going on for so long, and I think that by the couple years later, by 33, they were worth only 70 cents per the dollar. So you couldn't even, you weren't even getting the full amount for these. And less and less places started accepting these because there was a court battle going on, or a court case going on about this, and the courts decided that eventually, 1933, that these were not legal, that this, for maybe temporarily this could be done, but a school district could not release its own currency, which was pretty much what they were doing. And so after that, teachers just didn't get paid. They just didn't get that either, and they just had to dock what they said and said, well, we'll pay you as soon as we can. And that's how life was going for these people. I've now ventured out of the city and gone to the suburbs of Cook County, because the suburbs were also, of course, affected, as it wasn't just Chicago. The county tried to pool the resources, whatever resources they could, to ease this teaching situation. And I came to this school because it's got an interesting, it's named after the astronaut, Alan B. I'll show you. And their team name's the Astros. So I said, wow, there must be some connection between that astronaut, Alan B. Shepard, and the school. Maybe you grew up here, maybe donated some money, I don't know. But I couldn't find any connection whatsoever. Alan B. Shepard grew up in New England. He died in California. He ran an umbrella company, which had nothing to do with this area. So I don't know exactly why they named it after him. But anyway, back to the teachers' crisis in Cook County. Some other measures they did, especially when the crisis first hit in 1931, was they canceled kindergarten. That didn't sit so well with a lot of people, so they wound up going half the year kindergarten. They also got rid of junior highs. Junior highs were pretty new concept to have a stage in between grade school and high school, but they got rid of all the junior highs so they wouldn't have to run so many buildings. And so it was, after 8th grade, it was back to you either go to high school or you drop out. And so they got rid of that. The class sizes, of course, were humongous. 50, 60 kids was pretty common because they just didn't have enough teachers. And, the county tried to do what they could to get money. They went to the state many times. They were really trying to push the state to give them a chunk of the state tax, the sales tax. That's what I meant to say. A percentage of it. They wouldn't do it. They went to neighboring counties like DuPage and asked if they could share some of their school money. They wouldn't do it. So they were just running out of options. And when the court came, like I said, the circuit court ruled that the warrants, the scripts, they were unconstitutional. They were flooding the county. It was becoming like an alternate currency. So they ruled they can't write any more of these. The ones they have are still valid, but they couldn't issue out anymore. So the teachers just weren't not getting paid now. And how long could that last? Especially with these big class sizes. So they decided a large amount to come back for the 1934-35 school year. So it was that obviously was a huge problem. Chicago, already a high crime area, now no longer going to have kids in school. And, the federal government, why didn't they come in? Well, that wasn't something that was done at that time. Today they give away money pretty easily, but back then it was unprecedented for the federal government to pay an individual school board or a county like this, so they were hesitant to do it, especially with all the money they were spending on the New Deal. And but politics came in and helped, because at this time, this is August 1934, the NRA, National Recovery Act, is now in full force. Was ruled unconstitutional the next year by the Supreme Court, but that right now is in full force. And there was a provision there that gave unions a lot of power. This was the most controversial part of it. Even more power than they have today. It was the first law to really recognize unions, but it definitely tipped the scales in their favor for a period of time. People were allowed to organize, unions at any time for any reason, and employers basically they couldn't do anything about it. And so unions were kind of testing the waters at this time, and there was a huge strike going on in San Francisco at this time, where they longshoremen, the guys who unload the boats, refused to unload any goods, and they worked. They had a sympathetic truckers strike. They wouldn't bring in goods, and the truckers that weren't with them, they were blocking the road so they couldn't get in. And San Francisco, the city was running out of food and basic supplies, so it was a front page story every day. These people are kind of like prisoners in their own county, and people were wondering. There was this big standoff. There was violence in Rhode Island between a union there and the state police. That was in the headlines. There was a huge strike in Toledo, which was the worst hit city in the Depression. So the Roosevelt administration was looking for something good, some good news, especially with the midterms coming up. So they gave in, and they loaned the money to the county to pay the teachers. And they tried to make as much ballyhoo out of it as they could. They had all the newsreels there. They showed the huge line of teachers, all giddy about getting all this money finally. And, they picked a young woman to get the first one. And I said, "Oh, what are you going to do with all your money?" And of course, her answer was, "Well, I'm going to pay the mountain of bills I have accumulated over the past 3.5 years." But that pretty much finally ended the crisis. There were still some bumps in the road, but the teachers from then on were able to get steady paychecks, but for the rest of the time. But it was just a crazy episode to have such a large sector of public workers working without pay for such an extended period of time. A very interesting occurrence. I'm going to conclude this video about the education crisis of the early 30s in Chicago at one last very interesting educational institution in the city. I don't know if you've ever wondered where people from Chicago go to learn about farming. Well, this is one of the places right here. The Center for Urban Agricultural Education. I would have thought it existed, but it does. And not only that, but next door, connected to it, just right over yonder, is the Chicago High School of Agricultural Science. And behind the building, there are barns and fields and greenhouses, and who would have thought that they would have an agricultural school in Chicago? But here we are, within the city limits of Chicago, sort of on the south side, and here is the building. Chicago High School of Agricultural Science. Amazing. Amazing how far Chicago has come since that crisis of the early 30s. But it goes to show you that just how bad the Great Depression was, and the kind of suffering people had to go through, working months on end without pay. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to end my little Chicago series here because I'm out of time. I got to leave. But I started another video that I'm not going to be able to finish about the World's Fair they had here, Century of Progress it was called, 1933, 1934, in downtown Chicago, in the midst of all these crises going on. It was funded privately, so the city had nothing to do with it. But yeah, there's some good stories with that too. And I wanted to get into that, but didn't have time to finish it. But I will next time I come here, maybe when it's a little warmer. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story and learned something about the Depression in this city. And as always, thanks for watching. Again, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. And have a great day.